Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking today about the intense supports for social skill delivery for high school students. And I'm Dr. Erin Stone. I'm the Autism Coordinator in Alexandria City Public Schools, Virginia. You're going to hear a little bit later from my colleague, Stacy Ulrich. Today we're going to share with you the process that Alexandria City went through for developing a social skills class for our students with autism at the high school level. The students were moderate to high functioning and are in general education classes on track for a standard diploma. We were looking to enhance the social communication skills of this group of students so that their post-secondary outcomes, whether in employment or further education, would have positive outcomes. In the spring of 2011, Alexandria put together a work group. The work group was made up of school-based administrators and teachers, central office staff, and parents. And the purpose of our work group was to come up with a strategic plan to enhance the services for our students with autism in our school division. During the conversations that occurred in that work group, many of the parents were sharing information about their children or the children of their friends who had already graduated from high school and the challenges that their children faced when they were trying to find and maintain employment. Oftentimes the parents were reporting that their child might be able to obtain employment but were having trouble maintaining it due to a variety of different things. One of them might be that they really had a hard time learning the skill that was being expected of them at the job. They might have difficulty receiving feedback. And another one is that their social relationships on the job were very challenging, and that might have led to difficulties in the workplace. We also had staff and parents report to us that of our high school students, we were still seeing lots of issues in collaborative work groups. And as much of the employment sector is looking for collaborative work and cooperative groups, that having those problems in high school we knew was going to also lead to difficulties in employment later. One of the other areas that teachers reported to us is they're providing feedback to students. They often either were met with confusion on the student's part, or there might be some argument back or correction of the teacher. So how to receive feedback from an authority figure was also identified as an area of concern. Because of these concerns, one of the things that became identified in our autism plan, and it was listed as a task, is that we wanted to make sure we had a social skills class for secondary students with autism that were on track for a standard diploma that might need more than either a once-a-week counseling session or a social skills group that met once a week, something more intense. And so an elective class was developed in order to meet that need. Much of what the parents in Alexandria shared with us matches really closely to the national research that we're already aware of. The National Longitudinal Transition Study has shared that approximately half of the adults with autism have never held a job outside of their home since after the 3 to 4 years after leaving high school. And if they are employed, they're paid lower wages than other disability groups, and they're getting fewer hours. Only about 1 in 5 of the adults with autism were working full-time, either at a current job or their most recent job. And oftentimes their average pay was only $8.10. I've given you some resources on the slides so you can look up some other information. We'd like to share with you how we developed the course at the high school level and some of the examples of how it was implemented. We've been doing the course at our high school in Alexandria. We've completed this elective course for 3 years now. One of the things we did prior to even starting the course is we identified the resources that we wanted to use. And we wanted to look for specific curriculum that matched with moderate to high functioning students with autism. And so we selected 5 different resources. You'll see that 2 of them are by Michelle Garcia Winner, and she has a wonderful curriculum, the Think Social curriculum, which has lessons which provide the teacher materials, activities, and a time frame for how long it should take, as well as some follow-up activities to help for generalization. We also used a resource from Jed Baker, as well as the incredible 5-point scale and the hidden curriculum. Another resource you'll see frequently used throughout our classes is the social behavior map. And that's another resource that's built in as providing a template or a framework for many of the activities that we do. Once those resources were identified over the summer, what we did was we looked at, well, first we went to the VCU Communities of Learning in Autism conference, and they were sharing this wonderful resource, the Moving Toward Functional Social Competence, which does have a scope and sequence. It's an assessment, and it looks at 3 different levels of many different skills. And what we did is we used this resource that was shared with us through VCU and ACE to determine what are the major areas within social skill development that we wanted to match our resources with. So we have all of these 8 different areas that are addressed in the Moving Toward Functional Social Competence. And the skills are measured in 3 different levels. And so we took the skills that might be at all 3 levels and identified a theme of different skills under joint attention and a theme under greetings and self-regulation. And then we took the 5 resources that we had and we matched lessons up that matched to the skill that was listed under each of those different areas. I've got a sample here under perspective taking where you can see that is the student or the adolescent able to recognize simple emotions and determine the cause. And specifically under that skill or task or objective, there are 5 different lessons across 2 different resources. The lesson that is marked 1, it relates to the textbook, which you can see listed at the bottom, which is our Think Social curriculum. And then there are 3 different activities that would extend those lessons. In addition, there are 2 different extension activities and a separate resource that would help inform the teachers of the class about that specific skill or different things, different skills within it. So when you look at all of those lessons and activities and extension activities, you could have a good 3 weeks of activities to do with your students in that elective class, which we know matches really well with students with autism who need a great deal of repetition as well as practice in multiple settings. And so this way, when the teacher assesses the students in the class and is able to say, my students aren't able to identify emotion and match it with a cause that might lead a person to feel that way, they have an opportunity for 5 different lessons that would teach that skill, as well as a myriad of different activities that they can do to enhance and add to it. After we did that, we've done this for all of the different lessons, or all of the different skills addressed in the Moving Towards Functional Social Competence book. And so we have a scope and sequence that we've given to our teachers. And they start by doing an assessment of the student's skills and looking at the IEPs of each student and then matching the lessons that they wanted to teach. We're going to talk a little bit about course development, and my colleague Stacy Ulrich is going to explain a little bit about the class structure and the format that we used.
Thanks, Erin. I'm Stacy Ulrich, a board-certified behavior analyst for Alexandria City Public Schools. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the class structure and what a day looks like in the social skills high school class. The class is co-taught by a speech and language pathologist and our special education teacher that has been the lead teacher identified for students with autism at the high school level. The class being co-taught allows for smaller groups for breakout sessions, also to really work on skills identified for each of the students in their IEPs. The class is made up of anywhere from 12 to 15 students. It is listed as a service on their IEP, and it is an IEP team decision in order to have the students enrolled in this class. While there are other students at the high school level that could benefit from social skills instruction, they may not need the intensity of a 90-minute social skills class. So those students would then have it as a resource with the social worker or with the school psychologist, and only have it a couple times a week. The class utilizes evidence-based practices such as video modeling and the use of social behavior maps while the students are looking at videos in order to identify either examples or non-examples of the skills that we want them to master. We also use a lot of visual supports for the learners and any individualized accommodations that are listed on the students' IEPs. Something that we encourage our instructors to do is select a monthly topic or theme to focus on for the month. An example of a monthly topic would be prom or homecoming. The topics are typically generated by the staff, but we would like to encourage input as well from the students. If there's something happening that month that they might not be too comfortable with, or that they would like more instruction on in order to ease their anxiety, then we always welcome those ideas as well. So for instance, if we're talking about prom and focusing on prom for the month, some skills that we might teach them are, if you're interested in asking somebody to prom, how do you go about doing that? What are some ways that you can tell that that person is interested in you? And also, on the flip side, what do you do if the person is not interested in you? Do you continue to pursue them, or do you then back away and give them their space and move on to maybe ask somebody else? Another way that the topics are chosen is by feedback from staff that support the students in other areas of the building. For instance, if a general education teacher notices that a child is having, or a student is having difficulty with using appropriate language with a staff member versus with a friend, that might be a topic that we then choose to focus on for that month, because we know that this is something that's difficult for all of our students. So in order to provide structure and routine for the students, we do have a similar layout that we follow for each class. However, we also want to introduce various activities to keep the students from being too rigid about what to expect for each class. Each class begins with a warm-up activity, which is chosen by the teacher. An example of a warm-up activity is something that we call hot topics, where the staff and the students are encouraged to write down different topics of interest and place them in a hat. So what might be interesting to one student might not be interesting to another student. However, you're not sure which topic you're going to get. So the students are then broken up into small groups. Once they pick the topic, the students are then encouraged to talk about it for a designated amount of time. The amount of time that they talk about the topic depends upon how much practice they've had doing this skill. So in the beginning of the year, they're not going to spend too much time or to have too many exchanges. But further in the year, we'd expect them to maintain that conversation for a little bit longer. I did forget to mention that the class is supported by a number of paraprofessionals, so that when the class is broken up into small groups, there are adults that are able to facilitate the activities and help guide the instruction. After a warm-up activity, the students are then introduced to the topic or skill, and the instructors then define the skill that they're working on. At the acquisition phase of the class, it might take a little bit longer for the students to understand the topic, and the instructors then have to give multiple examples, possibly engage in some role plays, show some video clips using social behavior maps, and then they eventually transfer it over to where they have the student practicing the skill. Once it's at the level where the students are practicing the skill and creating role plays to show how they would use this specific skill, the peers are then encouraged to provide feedback to the students with the guidance of a teacher-made rubric, which you will see later on. It is required that the students practice the skill until they each acquire or achieve 80% independence with the teacher-made rubric. We're now going to go into a sample lesson that was taught in our class this year. So the lesson that we chose to share with you is about teaching the social fake. The reason we ended up choosing the social fake was because we got feedback from a lot of the staff members in the building that students were either sharing too much information when they were being asked how their day was, or how they did in a test, or how they were feeling. And it was hard to then break that conversation, or it was setting the student up for failure because they were becoming upset if they were having a bad day. Another reason is because students were having a really difficult time if they weren't interested in the topic that their communication partner was engaging in. So for instance, if I come over and start talking about football and the student doesn't have any interest in football and they just walk away. So we wanted to kind of practice how this would work and how it would be more natural for the student. We did start with a pre-test to just kind of gauge the students' understanding of a social fake and if they had any prior knowledge. The class lesson then began with direct instruction in defining what the social fake is. The teachers then engaged in multiple role plays to show different situations that would be appropriate to use the social fake. The students were each provided with a social behavior map, and they had to identify when would it be appropriate to use the social fake, what would be the expected behaviors versus the unexpected behaviors, and what positive outcomes would happen because you used the social fake. There were multiple role plays and lots of videos shown and to increase the students' understanding of how to use a social fake and why it would be appropriate. Another activity that the teachers had the students engage in is they were provided with response cards, which they would say either yes, a social fake was used, or no, it was not, and they would hold it up. And only the teachers could see their answer, and that way they weren't just giving the answer that their peers were providing. As I mentioned earlier, the class always starts with the warm-up activity. The video clips that the teachers use, typically they find on their own or with the help of a specialist. There are video clips that they take from TV shows. Big Bang Theory is a big one that they use, and the kids really love to watch as well. Or just YouTube clips if, there were a lot of videos that came up when we just searched for the social fake. So there's a wealth of information out there, and the students really enjoy watching the videos prior to engaging in their own role plays and scripting their own situations. When they're watching the videos, the students are asked to identify the specific skill that they're working on, but they also tie in skills that they've previously learned. So if they're using some figurative language, the students will then have to pull on that prior knowledge of learning about the figurative language and also mention that as well as the social fake. We want to make sure we're continuously practicing the skills they have previously mastered. Some examples of activities, again, is using the social behavior maps in order to identify expected versus unexpected. Role play scripts that are authored by the students of different social situations where a social fake would be expected. And it's always interesting to see what the students come up with as far as what they think would be appropriate for when to use a social script or a social fake. And then the students are required to role play their scripts, and they are graded by their peers that use the teacher-made rubric. Here's a sample role play from our high school class.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Have you guys taken ballet class before?
No, I never have.
What's it like? It's like, if you have to wear leotards, tights, and ballet shoes.
Oh, that's cool.
That's interesting.
You guys should take it.
I'll have to think about it. Thanks.
Okay.
Have a good day.
See ya.
All right.
So that was just a short clip of one of the role plays that our students engage in. Now, something that's exciting to see was the eye contact being made. They were talking to students that were non-preferred peers in the beginning of the class. They engaged in multiple exchanges, and it was based on a topic that they were not typically comfortable talking about. Now, what you can see now is an example of the teacher-made rubric. This rubric is based on the social fake lesson that we were talking about. It is broken into points they can score from a 1 to a 4, and it's targeting 3 specific skills, which includes turn-taking, communication skills, and then the social fake. So the rubrics are modified in order to match what is being taught that month. Down the bottom is where the students take their own notes. So they would write the name of the students that they're observing, and it typically is from 2 to 3 peers, sometimes 4, depending on the role play. And they would have to just take notes as to, how they think they're doing. They can circle on the rubric where they think they would score and then write down their scores. And then once they're finished completing their rubric, those are turned into the teacher. Prior to being given their final grade, the students are also asked to volunteer information on the spot to give some feedback. The students have been very supportive of each other with this, and it really helps build the learning community. They've given great feedback to each other, and they've been quite open to the feedback from their peers. There are a few times where they might be asked to reenact the script given some of the guidance that their peers have suggested. After the acquisition phase, the teachers then work on maintaining the skill. This again is continued with the same structure that we discussed earlier, with having a warm-up activity, the role play. However, the teachers then fade themselves out, and the students are more responsible for coming up with the ideas and coming up with and being more hands-on with the activities. They might break them. They do a lot of small group instruction, so they might break them up and give them a random topic that they have to then figure out how would a social fake fall into that category, or how could they use it given that scenario. This now has the staff kind of wandering around and facilitating and help guide the students, but it's really led more by the students at this point. Once the students have acquired the skill, we then work on maintaining the skill. In order to make this happen, the instructors will have unscripted conversations of topics that the teachers already know are not preferred for the student, and they would engage the student in these conversations and see if they then use the social fake with them. As well as not only within the classroom, the staff will also contrive situations around the building with Confederates in order to make sure that the students are practicing it when the situation arises in other areas that they're not expecting it to happen. In order to demonstrate mastering the skill, the students are given another scenario requiring the use of a social fake response, and then the students need to provide an expected response. Again, this can happen within the classroom with 80% accuracy, but as well they want to see it happening outside of the classroom with other staff and with other peers. And now you're going to hear from Erin about some challenges and next steps.
In conclusion, we've also recognized several challenges, and generalization is a challenge in all education in regards to how all of the skills we teach the student are going to be used outside of the situation in which we directly teach them. While we have tried to set up opportunities for settings with Confederates, it's been really hard to do that for all the skills across the year, and to find enough Confederates to make it a meaningful experience, so we're not always going back to the same person in the same location, which doesn't really provide us the generalization we're looking for. We've also had a really difficult time in regards to ensuring that all the other teachers understand what skills being taught so they can help support the student if they are using that skill in another class. In high school, they have 7 different teachers. And in our high school, we have alternating days, so they don't have the same classes every single day. So in order to reach that number of teachers, it's a big challenge to tell them what the student's working on and how it should look and how they can support them. The other thing is if the student is trying to use those skills outside of the classroom, catching them doing it and then providing them the reinforcement so that they are recognizing that they're doing it right, so that they will continue to do it right in the future, has also been challenging. High schools are big places, and our kids are all over the buildings. So that's been a very big challenge for us. The thing that we would like to do in our next steps is, number one, increasing the resources in our scope and sequence. Using that, moving toward functional social competence framework, but increasing the number of resources that we build lessons into and enhanced activities, so teachers can select a skill that they want to teach and have a number of activities and a number of lessons that they can pull from to really make it a rich and diverse experience for the students. But we also want to look at our students that have more impact, that may not be in that class with the students who are on a standard diploma track. So we're hoping to take the Career and Transition program that we have for our students who are requiring more support in job coaching and awareness, and infusing those work readiness skills and social skills into their programming. Taking their curriculum that is available for them and taking similar resources such as the peers curriculum for school-age children and infusing those skills into their career and transition programming so that they can understand how to problem solve job-related situations. How do they handle receiving corrective feedback in the workplace? If your phone rings in the middle of your job and your boss gives you a funny look and then calls you into his office, how do you navigate that conversation? And also providing them some social scripts that they can practice for the water cooler conversations so that their social relationships can be more natural in the setting. We're looking forward to adding that into some of the other supports we provide for students with autism in Alexandria City. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've really enjoyed having you listen about all the work we've been doing. We appreciate VCU for giving us this opportunity.